It would appear that we have a secret Chinese biolab within the borders of the United States. The CDC has known about it since May, but we've got no information about it, period. I wonder how many more there could actually be. The fact is that there's no way this is a singular instance that hasn't happened anywhere else. We have the multiple instances of Chinese state police stations being run in multiple states across the country. We'll get into that to finish off this segment. And the one thing that I can't get over is the fact that much like how the United States funds their biological weapons and virological experiments abroad so we don't have to do them on our own domestic shores, it appears that the Chinese government is doing the exact same. Quite fascinating. Let's go ahead and get into the tweet that made me aware of all of this initially. From Dylan Ullman on Twitter. And Dylan actually has an article that was written about him in Timcast where he talks about the process of going from being an ideological young man who believed in the purpose of the United States and its military to becoming a radical anarchist who went from being the person who believed in the flag to the one who burned his uniform. It's a really good piece. I should honestly make an actual video on it because he's very well spoken. He understands the theory and principles of libertarianism and anarchy very well. He's very well spoken, and I'd argue he argues for the fundamentals and its orientation and how it would be constructed to naturally fit society and how we operate as free individuals very well. So, well worth checking out. I'll either leave the link in the description. Well, I will leave the link in the description for it, but I may be making a video on it in general. So here we see, fun fact, a secret Chinese biolab was uncovered in Reedley, California, that was illegally making COVID-19 and pregnancy test kits, bacterial and viral agents, and housing 900 white mice, which we see later that it was more. How many more are there, and how long have they been there? How many more are there that we know about? How many more are there that we don't know about? How long have they been here, and how long have we known that they've been here? Investigators also found blood tissue and other bodily fluid samples. They also found thousands of vials of contaminated, unlabeled fluids. They're going to have to test all of these, and it's going to take an extreme amount of time and a large amount of taxpayer dollars. To top it all off, they found 900 genetically engineered mice engineered to catch and carry COVID-19 living in inhumane conditions. And when I show the pictures of what was taken from the actual quote-unquote biolab, well, what we'll see is that it was absolutely going to be inhumane conditions because they didn't even store these chemicals or their materials properly. We are just now hearing about this, and the CDC has known about it since May. They claim they've known about it since May. What other ones have they known about that they haven't disclosed nor talked about, if they do? From May 2nd through May 4th, court documents confirm that the CDC found potentially infectious agents at the location. These included both bacterial and viral agents, including chlamydia, E. coli, streptococcus, pneumonia, hepatitis B and C, herpes 1 and 5, and rubella. The CDC also found samples of malaria. What aren't we being told? I would assume large amounts. And I would also argue the fact that, well, it doesn't matter many of the times what questions you ask, because the establishment is going to try and sweep it under the rug unless this catches mainstream appeal. How did the DoD, the most well-funded entity around the globe for decades, somehow in a country with mass surveillance miss the Chinese purchasing U.S. land and putting down biolabs? You can't purchase land and pay it off without paying property taxes, and you're telling me the federal government wasn't aware of the fact that we were operating with Chinese biolabs on domestic soil? I don't buy it. Something seems fishy, he says. It reminds me of how they couldn't find bin Laden for 10 years who was just hiding in his house, all while the world was being gaslit into another illegal war orchestrated by the military-industrial complex. And what did it take to get Osama bin Laden? It took 10 years, trillions of dollars, our bravest young men going abroad and then coming back home and killing themselves in mass, committing suicide, 16,000 of them dead. I believe it's 23 veterans a day that commit suicide in the United States. And that's just here. Imagine all the people abroad that are also suffering just like our veterans do. And what do we see? We turned from fighting the Taliban so we could take Afghanistan from the Taliban and liberalize it. And in the process, we spent trillions of dollars to turn Afghanistan back over to who else but the Taliban. We got nothing out of it except our bravest and brightest young men going abroad to go traumatize themselves so they would come home and not be able to handle what it would do to their psyche and then commit suicide in mass. And then people simply want to advocate for the fact that we fund more wars abroad so other people can experience these traumas. Is this something we should be concerned about, or is it just another ploy to gaslight the American public into agreeing with a war with China? What do you think? And I think that it's not necessarily that it could be used for it, but that it will be used for it by certain people, like in the neocon establishment, people that are just diehard Republicans. They will advocate for the fact that this is going to be fuel for the fire that we should go to war with China because China is apparently already at war with us. China is a paper house of cards. And I mean, it is a dragon, nonetheless on the economic scale, but it is a paper dragon. And once it goes up in flames, it is going to be spectacular. And I don't mean that in a good way, because it's going to affect global markets to a scale that many people do not understand. And I'd argue not even myself understand. What we see is that illegal Chinese biolabs uncovered in California, what they found is deeply disturbing. This is the article that he found that led him to making this tweet. I will jump into that in just a moment. We're going to jump into this tweet from Mike Kudry, and he says, wow, secret unlicensed Chinese biolabs raided in California. CDC found infectious viral agents, and he lists the ones that we just covered, being malaria, rubella, HIV, chlamydia, E. coli, streptococcus, pneumonia, hepatitis, and herpes. The lab also contains 900 genetically engineered mice living in inhumane conditions, with an under 175 found dead. And as we know, it's 900 mice that can carry and transmit COVID-19. You know that if there are 175 found dead and 900 here, that there certainly must have been more prior. What we see is most of the boxes and material found had addresses coming from China, and the company that owned warehouses had main offices in China. This is not sanitary nor safe. Look at how this is all stored. Were they supposed to have already constructed something that was far safer than this prior, and that's one reason they had so many boxes of things sent? I really don't know. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and get into the articles that cover this. From MSNBC, the mouthpiece of the Leviathan itself, the CDC detects coronavirus, HIV, hepatitis, and herpes in an unlicensed California lab. The CDC found at least 20 potentially infectious agents at the warehouse in Fresno County. Local and federal authorities spent months investigating a warehouse in Fresno County, California that they suspect was home to an illegal, unlicensed laboratory full of lab mice, medical waste, and hazardous materials. Fresno County Public Health Department has been evaluating and assessing the activities of an unlicensed laboratory. And Reedley, the health department's assistant director, Joe Prado, said in a statement on Thursday, all of the biological agents were destroyed by July 7th following a legal abatement process. So I wonder if they would have tested all of them and actually found out what they all were, because they know what some of them were clearly. But did they test all of them before they destroyed the process or destroyed the actual evidence? The evaluation required coordination and collaboration with multiple federal and state agencies to determine and classify biological and chemical contents on site, in addition to assessing jurisdictional authority under the unique situation, Prado said. Which wouldn't surprise me at all, and this is the actual building itself. Something if you were driving by on the freeway, you wouldn't think to look at twice, which is exactly why it was perfect for this. It says, according to the court documents, city officials sent inspection to the location on March 3rd for building violations and found various chemicals being stored. On March 16th, an inspection by county public officials said that they allegedly turned up medical devices that were thought to have been developed on site, such as COVID-19 and pregnancy tests. Certain rooms of the warehouse were found to contain several vessels full of liquid and various apparatus. So I wonder what they thought upon immediately seeing this. Were they like, we need to get a hazmat team out here now? That's what I would assume. So, Fresno County public health officials staffed that observed blood, tissue, and other bodily fluid samples and serums in thousands of vials of unlabeled fluids suspected to be biological material. Well, they're not going to test that. I would assume they would just get rid of that. Hundreds of mice at the warehouse were kept in inhumane conditions. The court documents say the city took possession of the animals in April, euthanizing 773 of them, which it stated the fact that they knew about this in May. So, they clearly knew about this beforehand. So, again, just proving the fact that you can't get something too consistent out of the corporate press. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention tested the substances and detected at least 20 potentially infectious agents, including coronavirus, HIV, hepatitis, and herpes, according to the Human Health and Services, later dated June 6th. Man, this took a while, and this is something that we're just finding out now in August. I wonder how many more of these are actually around, and they're really just trying to go behind the scenes now that they've discovered this, and they're like, okay, we need to clear house and make sure there aren't any more of these and that the public don't find out. An investigation found that the tenant was Prestige Biotech, a company registered in Nevada and unlicensed for business in California. City officials spoke with Xingqun Yao, who was identified as the company president through emails and included in court documents. Yao told officials that Prestige Biotech moved assets belonging to a defunct company, Universal MedTech Inc. So what we see is Reedley Warehouse from Fresno after the UMI went under. Prestige Biotech was a creditor to UMI and unidentified as its successor, according to the court and all its documents. Officials were unable to get any California-based address for either company, except for the previous Fresno location, which the UMI has been evicted. The other addresses provided for identical authorization agents or authorized agents were either empty offices or addressed in China and could not be verified, the court document said. Prestige Biotech said it is accused of failing to comply with orders, including providing a plan of biological abatement and disposal of materials. Emails sent to Yao and Prestige Biotech requesting the comment were not immediately answered on Thursday. Prado told NBC affiliate KSE of Fresno that there was an associate with Prestige Biotech who was not forthcoming with information. Court documents say that they failed to provide any licensing or permit that also allows experimentation or laboratory activity. So, the big question would be, is this something that's actually funded by the CCP? And we see multiple articles talking about this illegal Chinese biolab uncovered in California. Fairly shocking, secret medical lab in California stored bioengineered mice with latent COVID. And the fact is, if they could actually spread COVID-19, that is a major ordeal, because if they can spread it and make it transmissible, then this is a fact that the Chinese government would have been funding labs within the United States to do biological research to check and see if we could make animals spread COVID-19 to humans. And if that's the case, well, that's huge. But here we see a month-long investigation into a rural California warehouse has uncovered a illegal laboratory filled with infectious agents. I don't know how much we're going to get about this, and if they're going to actually come out and say, look, here's the map of the United States. We found X amount of labs in Y places, and we realized that they're doing this for Z cause. If we don't actually get more on this, I don't know what we can trust. Because we see from American military news that this isn't the only time that the Chinese have actually funded organizations and institutions within the United States. We know that they're buying farmland, much like how people like Bill Gates are, as well as the fact that at least 6 more secret Chinese police stations in the U.S., says a report. This is from American Military News Network. There are multiple Chinese police stations operating in cities across the U.S., according to an investigative group who exposed the stations after the FBI arrested 2 people in connection with one of the operations this week. So it's not just biolabs. These are police stations that are used to monitor people who have defected from the CCP that now live in the United States, and this is used to monitor them on a daily basis effectively. The not-for-profit organization Safeguard Defenders said there is an additional statement in New York City, one in Los Angeles, and other operations in San Francisco, Houston. That's where I live. No. Cities in Nebraska and Minnesota, and the New York Post reported. It was not clear from reporting how many of the alleged police stations were actually in each location. Man, I almost want to know where these places are so I can walk in and you just step in and see if it's just a building full of Chinese people. That would be so fascinating. It was not clear from the reporting how many of these alleged police stations were in each location. Oh my gosh, if there's just disparate little small Chinese defunct cells throughout the United States and also just disparately spread around amongst Houston, and I've walked into these places and not realized it, oh my gosh. We found at least 4 listed in the U.S. by PRC, the People's Republic of China's public security authorities, plus flagged an additional 4 overseas China service centers in the U.S. set up by the UFWD networks responsible for manning stations. A spokeswoman for Safeguard Defenders said all of this on Tuesday. The spokeswoman referred to the United Front Work Department, an arm of Chinese Communist Party linked to the overseas police stations, according to previous reports from Safeguard Defenders. The fact that there's just Chinese police stations set up throughout the United States that isn't at the embassy is unbelievable to me. Do you think that the Chinese would allow United States to have American police stations set up throughout Beijing and Shanghai? No, of course not. They would act immediately to excommunicate them from their society. But for some reason, the government can't even seem to do that. It can't seem to do the small amount of things that it's actually supposed to do. So maybe it's just inefficient and useless at best. The spokeswoman referred to the United States Front Work Department as an armchair of the Communist Party linked to overseas police stations. Safeguard Defenders has a document more than 100 outposts in dozens of countries, and officials are increasingly worried about them as a way for China to spy and keep tabs on its people abroad. And here's a really interesting thing. Is it also a way for people that work for the Chinese Communist Party and who are loyal to the CCP to report their findings to places so they don't have to go abroad to do so if they're in the United States? That's a curious thought. The suggestion of additional Chinese police stations in the U.S. comes after Monday arrests of 2 New York men charged with running one in New York City's Chinatown. The men conspired to act as agents of the Chinese government and establishing and running the first overseas police station in the U.S., according to the Justice Department. As alleged, the defendants and their co-conspirators were tasked with doing the PRC's bidding and including helping locate a Chinese dissident living in the United States and obstructed our investigation by deleting their communications, said attorney Brennan Peace for the Eastern District of New York. Such a police station has no place in New York City or any American community. Goddamn right it doesn't. I fully agree with that. So, as you can see, the Chinese are clearly investing to take land from the United States so they can go ahead and do research on your property, which, by the way, this is property that your property taxes pay for the upkeep of if someone isn't paying for it. Let's go ahead, realize what's going on here, that while the American people are losing their sense of patriotism, the sense of patriotism in the Chinese only seems to grow ever stronger. And as our communities become ever more bifurcated, the Chinese appear to be establishing instances of actual institutional power, whether it be biolabs or police stations, within American communities, which, who know, may actually be pushing out propaganda that will then further bifurcate these communities, which would then only gin up the push from the neocons and the Republicans and the people in the Democratic establishment who are so war hungry that they see China and the war over Taiwan as our next big crusade after Russia. That's all I've got for this. Go ahead, tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section below. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it, a thumbs down if you didn't. Tell someone you love them. Share this with someone if you enjoyed it. Stay lovely, stay great. Peace out.